that decreased amygdala tone gives you a window of opportunity, right? And
We
you have
kind of reprogram.
the enhanced neuroplasticity on top of that. And so I have this enhanced neuroplasticity. So now I can think differently. If I can work out a way to figure out a different way of doing things, I can actually change my behavior because I have the neuroplasticity. I have the fear out of the way. And nobody really knew at the beginning. None of us knew. We had no idea why it was working. It was just like some kind of voodoo, and it worked.
You did look into like the receptor blockade and
yeah. So there was a little, there's a little bit of knowledge about it, but we were like, I don't really know. And so now we've had about 4 years of research, and actually I'm outside of Austin, and the University of Texas is their medical school is doing research on it as well. And so it turns out that all the psychedelics, obviously they're working through some form of DMT. It's not all they do, but that's a big component of it, the DMT pathways. And what they've shown with functional MRIs is that it decreases the amygdala tone, right? So the whole fight or flight, your hypervigilance component of PTSD, right? So what you're alerted by, what you're afraid of, what's concerning for you, decreases amygdala tone by 90%.
Oh, wow.
You haven't had that since you're like 4 or 5 years old. It's an amazingly low level of sort of stress and vigilance.
Bliss. Yeah.
But of course, also it accelerates all this neuroplasticity, right? BDNF, glial cell derived neurotropic factor, VEGF, recruit stem cells.
It seems like ibogaine is like a big brain reset, and you get that. You get that a little bit from cerebrolizin, but probably not to the extent that ibogaine can potentially.
Right.
But of course, the treatment can be pretty rough, from what I've heard.
It's brutal, yeah. So I've always, anytime I've learned anything for the SEALs that if it was appropriate, I would do it myself, so I could see if I thought it was snake oil or if it seemed professional enough for our organization, whatever. So, I had done, I'd done ayahuasca. And it was super, super ritualized, and they had the chicken bones and the gongs and the, whatever, the crystal bowls and all that. Right. And I thought, man, if this room was full of SEALs, they'd have that guy tied up in the corner, like telling him to shut up and quit banging the gong, And so I was like, that's not going to work. But I hadn't done ibogaine because my body needed it so soon. And so then we got treated him, and then we treated another guy. And so then I was like, all right, no sense of me doing it now because everybody's done it. But I did end up doing it about a year ago, just because they had an open spot, and they said, hey, do you want to come down? And because we have 2 pipelines for that now. And they're like, we have an open spot if you want to come do it, because you've never done it. And that, it was the most mild for me. I've done psilocybin, ayahuasca, and ibogaine. But I think I got underdosed. They say like kind of bigger guys, they tend to underdose. So I've seen that a lot with kind of guys. Once you start getting around like 250 and up, like it seems like their formula kind of falls apart.
Really?
Because it's weight adjusted, but it kind of falls apart at that end. It seems like. Right. I know several
probably
guys
have to be careful because you don't want to overdo it. Just like with what is it? The stuff for surgery.
Yeah,
the
ketamine.
So depressing. Yeah, ketamine or just real. What is it called?
Well, and
they put you to sleep. It's so depressive that you stop breathing.
Yeah. It can impair respiration, but it's also especially ibogaine, but all of them. DMT is a stimulant, and if you have any sort of heart condition, you can have problems with that. But ibogaine itself is known to cause dysrhythmias, arrhythmias. And so they when you do ibogaine, you usually have in a heplock, so they can give you IV magnesium if you start having arrhythmias. But yeah, so it turns out that those brain changes. I think the biggest difference, and I'm not saying this with certainty, but where it looks like this is going with the research we've collected, anyways, is that of course, the big benefit is the actual experience, where you lose the ego. Hopefully, if you get dosed correctly and you do your sort of heroic journey, you lose the ego, and it allows you to look at yourself more objectively, right? So you're not your ego's not protecting you from seeing the truth, and you can kind of look at yourself objectively and go, well, that's dumb. Like, why am I doing it that way? Like, I've been doing this my whole life. It's a dumb idea. I shouldn't do that anymore. And that's a great experience. And it gives you kind of opportunities to see things that maybe you hadn't thought about. And like, there's work to be done there. But as soon as you come out of that, if your ego comes back and all your fear comes back, you're not going to want to work on it, right? So that decreased amygdala tone gives you a window of opportunity, right? And you have the enhanced neuroplasticity on top of that. And so I have this enhanced neuroplasticity. So now I can think differently. If I can work out a way to figure out a different way of doing things, I can actually change my behavior because I have the neuroplasticity. I have the fear out of the way to allow me to think through that. And I got shown this pathway during my hallucination, things I needed to work on.
Right.
And then it turns out that the effects of that, they wane over time, but you can have significant effects from the psilocybin for 2 to 3 months after your heroic dose. Then ayahuasca is about 4 to 6 months, and ibogaine can be 9 months to a year of having that decreased amygdala tone and increased neuroplasticity and those opportunities. So, and like you said, there's like this receptor scrubbing effect, and like it's kind of like a reset of every neurotransmitter with the ibogaine. Right. So there's other things going on, but I think that's probably the foundational thing. And then, I mean, we had been doing this as a community for 7 or 8 years before I found out that ibogaine is an amazing anti-inflammatory. And so when people wake up the next day and they have these big bright eyes, what you're seeing is like they don't have any blood vessels in their sclera. So then the inflammation in the eye bags have gone away, and so their eyes look bigger. And just some SEAL who's no medical training at all, he said that to me, and I was like, what do you mean anti-inflammatory? I started looking into it, like, oh, okay, it is. Right. It's a huge anti-inflammatory. So you're decreasing brain inflammation, increasing neuroplasticity, and then giving yourself the decreased anxiety of the lower sympathetic tone. And then, of course, lower sympathetic tone means lower stress, lower catabolic hormones, like just better lifestyle, lower pain, like whatever. So they amazing benefits with them. And I've had guys do psychedelics, so during their hyperbaric treatment of 2 months, I've had them do psychedelics in the middle of that and have them on neurotropic.
Is that a disassociating dose where you lose the ego, or is that a micro dose where you?
No. So they're not doing it in the chamber, but I'm just saying during that period, because you take weekends off. So during that period, they'll go do their weekend retreat, like in the middle of that. So you already have a lot of those growth factors and a lot of that neuroplasticity already going, and then you can keep it. Hopefully, you can keep it going. And I've had them on neurotropic. I've only had 2 guys so far, but I've had some guys on neurotropic peptides at the same time of doing all that. I mean, amazing. And it's one of the reasons cerebralizing is such a favorite of mine. I did that with cerebralizing and ibogaine and hyperbarics, and two SEALs that have done that. And I mean,
probably life-changing.
It is so life-changing. You can't even explain it. I'd sound like an infomercial if I told you.
No, but I can definitely see it because I've done a lot of research in hyperbaric and ibogaine I know a little bit about, but I have a lot of experience with cerebralizing myself, and it kind of you reprogram yourself,
Right.
And it's very liberating to sort of say. Like I have plenty of experience with psychedelics back in Holland, and I made a lot of breakthrough realizations on what I wanted out of life.
Right.
And of course with cerebralizing, you can kind of, reprogram yourself to a certain extent as well.
Right.
And that's usually for the benefit if you can let go of the ego and kind of address the things that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
Amazing. And you can't always get it in one treatment, obviously. So you might need to do it consecutively, But with time, if you're willing to work on it, I think you can make some very positive changes to your life.